Welcome to aminacademy.com. In material science and engineering, let us discuss about classification of materials. Solid materials have been conveniently grouped and classified into three basic categories like metals, ceramics, and polymers. The scheme is based primarily on chemical makeup and atomic structure. Regarding chemical makeup and its atomic structure, the materials are classified in three broad categories. Most materials fall into one distinct group or another. In addition, there are the composites that are engineered combination of two or more different materials. A brief explanation of these materials is under. First, materials are classified based on their chemical, mechanical, and physical properties. The four main classifications of materials are ceramics, metals, polymers, and composites. Now, first we'll discuss about metals. Metals are opaque, that means it won't allow the light through it. Lustrous elements that are good conductors of heat and electricity. Most metals are malleable and ductile and are in general denser than the other elemental substances. Metals are composed of one or more metallic elements like iron, aluminium, copper, titanium, gold, nickel like. The often also non-metallic elements also there, that is carbon, nitrogen, oxygen in relatively small amount is added to that alloys something. Here atoms in metals and their alloys are arranged in a very orderly fashion and are relatively dense in comparison to the ceramics and polymers. With regard to mechanical characteristics, these materials are relatively stiff. That means metals are relatively stiff and strong. Edge are ductile, that is capable to large amount of deformation without fracture is called ductile, and are resistant to fracture is called a ductility of the material, which accounts for their widespread use in structural applications. Metallic materials have large number of non-localized electrons, that is the electrons are not bound to particular atoms. Many properties of metals are directly attributable to these electrons. For example, metals are extremely good conductors of electricity and heat and are not transparent to visible light, that is opaque. A polished metal surface has a lustrous appearance. In addition, some of the metals like iron, cobalt, nickel have desirable magnetic properties also. Next, we will discuss about ceramics briefly. Ceramics are generally made by taking mixture of clay, earthen elements, powders, and water and shaping them into desired forms. Once the ceramics has been shaped, it is fired in a high temperature oven known as kiln. Often ceramics are covered in decorative, waterproof, paint-like and substances known as glasses and pottery materials. Ceramics are compounds between metallic and non-metallic elements. They are most frequently oxides, nitrates, and carbides. For example, common ceramic materials include aluminum oxide, that is Al2O3, silicon dioxide or silica, that is SiO2, silicon carbide, SiC, and silicon nitride. And in addition, what some refer to the transitional ceramics, those composed of clay materials, minerals. Historically, ceramics have exhibited extreme brittleness, lack of ductility, and are highly susceptible to fracture. That means it easily fracture. However, newer ceramics are being engineered to have improved resistance to fracture. These materials are used for cookware, cutlery, hot boxes, and even automobile engine parts. Furthermore, ceramics materials are typically insulative to the electricity and passage of heat through it, and are more resistant to high temperature some ceramics and harsh environment than are metals and polymers. With regard to optical characteristics, ceramics may be transparent, translucent, or opaque to the light. And some of the oxide ceramics, that is, exhibit magnetic behavior. Several common ceramics objects are pottery and hot boxes and plastic materials, cables, rubber, lot of things. These are not rubber something. Ceramics is pottery as well as some fibers and some other materials regarded as ceramics with these conditions. Next, polymers. Polymer is high. Polymer is any of a class of natural or synthetic substances composed of very large molecules called macromolecules, which are multiples of simpler chemical units called monomers. Polymers make up many of the materials in living organisms and are the basis of many minerals and non-made materials. Polymers include the familiar plastic and rubber materials. Many of them are organic compounds that are chemically based on carbon, hydrogen, and other non-metallic elements like oxygen, nitrogen, and silicon. Furthermore, they have very large molecular structure, often chain-like in nature, that often have backbone of carbon atoms. Some common and familiar polymers are polyethylene, nylon, polyvinyl chloride, that is PVC, polycarbonate, polystyrene, and silicon rubber. These materials typically have low densities, whereas their mechanical characteristics are generally dissimilar to those of the metallic and ceramic materials. They are not as stiff as strong as these metals. That means polymers are not so strong than metals. Familiar objects made of metals and metal alloys are silverware, that is spoon and fork, scissors, coins, gear, and welding rim, and nut and bolt. Lot of polymers, even nut and bolt also familiar with polymer materials. Next is composite. Composites are simply a combination of two or more constituent materials with different physical and chemical properties. When combined, they produce a material with characteristics different from their original properties. The two main components within the composites are matrix and fiber. Further about composites. A composite is composed of two or more individual materials that come from the categories previously discussed, that is metal, ceramics, and polymers. The design goal of a composite is to achieve a combination of properties that is not displayed by any single materials, and also to incorporate the best characteristics of each of the component materials. A large number of composite types are represented by different combinations of metals, ceramics, and polymers. Furthermore, some naturally occurring materials are composites, for example, wood and bone. However, most of those we consider in our discussion are synthetics, like human-made composites. One of the most common and familiar composites is fiberglass, in which small glass fibers are embedded within a polymeric materials like normally an epoxy or polyester. The glass fibers are relatively strong and stiff, but also brittle, whereas the polymer is more flexible. Thus, fiberglass is relatively stiff, strong, and flexible. In addition, it has low densities, so it's more useful. Wherever the low densities, low weight is necessary, we can use composite materials. Another technological important material is the carbon fiber reinforced polymer, that is CFRP. That is a composite of carbon fibers that are embedded within the polymers. These materials are stiffer and stronger than glass fiber reinforced materials. There is an alternative and more illustrative way of representing property values of material type than we discussed is also there. So far, we discussed about material in material science and engineering. We discussed about classification, main classification of materials. We have done. Please subscribe our YouTube channel.